LGBTQ and marijuana's relationship. What type of relationship do they have? Do they even have a relationship? Wait, what are we learning today in Blue Productions? Dude, I literally just told you. According to the Trevor Project, 1 in 5 LGBTQ adults over the age of 21 use marijuana, which is 21% of LGBTQ adults. 1 in 5 LGBTQ adults use marijuana? That's kinda a lot of adults. What's even a crazier fact is that 1 in 3 LGBTQ youth use marijuana, and 29% of those youth are under 21. I can see that there is a high number of LGBTQ users of marijuana, and now I see that there's quite a big relationship between them. But first of all, what does marijuana do to the body, and why do people like it so much? Alright, I'll explain all of that in just a second, but first, welcome to my lab. As you can see with these lab clothes, I am an expert scientist. I make concoctions like this. I totally do. Anyways, I'm kind of getting sidetracked, so I'll explain marijuana's effects on the brain right now. Marijuana primarily affects the endocannabinoid system. What even is the endocannabinoid system? The endocannabinoid system has a bunch of chemicals called cannabinoids, which transfer chemical messages to your neurons, which affects the areas of the brain that control your movement, pleasure, memory, thinking, concentration, time perception, coordination, and your sensory. Okay, so how does marijuana affect those areas? That's a really good point you make, and I'm about to get into that. Marijuana has a chemical called THC, which is similar to the cannabinoid receptors in your brain. The cannabinoid receptors is what transfers the chemical message to your neurons, which enact the effects I stated above. Since THC is almost identical to these cannabinoids, it can activate the endocannabinoid system, increasing the messages the neurons fire, making your brain work at an unnatural rate, which is why you feel like you're slowing down. Wow, this THC chemical sounds like it is pretty crazy. That's not all THC can do. THC also affects your reward system. The chemical THC causes an excessive amount of dopamine to be released from your brain. What even is dopamine? Dopamine is a chemical in the brain that gets released whenever you do something that feels rewarding. For example, you eat some really good food. Dopamine is the brain's way of saying, we need to do these actions to stay alive. Since THC releases an excessive amount of dopamine, your brain will crave more weed, causing your brain to feel really rewarded, which can lead to addiction. Those who are at risk of addiction are people who have addictive personalities, their family has a history of addiction, people who have feelings of isolation, or if their mental state is really poor. What are some of the harmful effects THC has on the human brain? The negative effects of marijuana can include hallucinations, delusions, a loss of memory, a harder time learning, a harder time with coordination, meaning that you can't really play as much sports, the ability to stay focused, and a loss of self. Now, these effects may not happen to everyone, and some of them experience them at a lesser effect than others, but these are still possible side effects. Are there also benefits to cannabis? There are also some medical benefits to cannabis, such as helping relieve pain, helps with PTSD, it is used to treat HIV, it can help relieve pain from cancer, and also it can help with sleep. So marijuana, it just makes the body more relaxed, but with your body being more relaxed comes positive and negative effects that can lead to addiction as well? Yep, that's exactly correct. I heard that there was a push for legalization of marijuana. Why wasn't it legal back then? Welcome to my history corner. I think this is a pretty big upgrade from the last area. And guess what we're doing here? Talking about history. Why do you always gotta change from area to area? But here I am, just in the same area. Why can't you just stay in one place? Don't question it. I just like to change up the scenery sometimes because it makes me feel good. But to answer your current question, marijuana has a long history of being used in the United States. Native Americans have used marijuana to treat medical conditions such as fever, insomnia, headaches, constipation, joint pain, and diseases. You literally did not answer my question, at all. I did not appreciate that you interrupted me. Anyways, in the 1930s, the recreational use of marijuana rose significantly, and since this was during the Prohibition era, a lot of Americans were being sneaky about their alcohol and weed consumption. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed, which eliminated the use of marijuana without criminalizing it. In the 1970s, which was the war on drugs era, marijuana was criminalized because it hit three requirements, which are high potential for abuse, no accepted medicinal use in the US, and lack of safety, making it a Schedule I substance. Why are people pushing for its legalization? The legalization of marijuana is being pushed because Americans started to see that the drug can be used medically during the 1990s. The war on drugs also disproportionately affected people of color. Black Americans are 4 times more likely to get arrested for marijuana use than their white counterparts. 89% of drug-related arrests were people of color. But non-people of color use drugs like marijuana just as much as people of color do. So it really just doesn't make any sense. Oh wow! That is so unfair that people of color are being targeted more by the justice system. Marijuana might help expunge people's records, meaning they will get to have a clean slate in life. States like Massachusetts and some cities are starting equity programs. And in California, SB 1294 was passed by former Governor Jerry Brown, and it states that persons most harmed by the cannabis criminalization and poverty be offered assistance to enter the multi-million-dollar industry as entrepreneurs or as employees with high-quality, well-paying jobs. Okay, there's some hope now, and I understand why the government tried to ban marijuana, but I also understand why people are trying to legalize marijuana. But also, what does that have to do with LGBTQ people? The AIDS pandemic affected many LGBTQ people in the 1980s and 90s, and no research or treatment was being done to help any of these people. Many LGBTQ activists since 1976 have seen marijuana as a medicinal herb that can be a way to ease their pain and symptoms of AIDS. On November 13, 1996, California Prop 215 was passed, making medical marijuana legal in California. The bill was co-written by Dennis Perrin, a gay man who lost his significant other to AIDS. California Prop 215 is paving the way for other states to legalize marijuana. Oh wow! I did not know LGBTQ activists help directly make medical marijuana legal. I want to know, why LGBTQ people use so much marijuana? To understand why LGBTQ people use so much weed, we have to first understand the LGBTQ history, but I'm going to specifically focus it on America since this is the country we're mostly talking about. In the 1960s, gay men were seen as predators and could be killed for having feelings towards the same gender. Police harassment was also very rampant in gay bars, so that wasn't even safe. Even the gay bars weren't safe? Also, I like the new location. It's kind of cool. I know, right? On June 28th, 1969, the Stonewall riots occurred. The police raided Stonewall, which was a gay bar where many people in the New York City area found their safe place. If the police caught you there, they would arrest you and you could lose your job and reputation. They were all kicked out, but instead of leaving, the crowd grew angry and eventually riots ensued. The queer community was angry, and they were throwing whatever objects they could at the cops inside of Stonewall. That night, they helped future LGBTQ movements fight for their own rights, paving a way for a better future. Wow, there's a lot of issues LGBTQ youth face. Is there a way to help them? Creating more safe spaces for LGBTQ youth will be a good start because they won't feel as isolated, forming a community with others. That safe place can be their way of escape instead of turning to marijuana or drugs that are worse. A good example of a safe place, which is located in LA, is the LA LGBTQ Center. They house homeless youth and help them kind of get back on their feet, and they also just host meetings for youth to talk. So it's a viable option and it can work. Okay, that sounds like a viable option. But I'm wondering, is the government doing anything to help the youth out? New topic, new location. Welcome to my government era. Excuse me. I feel like I'm in my judge era. For real. See this mallet? I'm a professional judge.
Bruh, is this how you're trying to make yourself look like a government official?
Yeah, and what about it?
Whatever. Just start. You have an audience waiting for you to tell you the most important part of this project.
There are three main government bills that I want to focus on, and they're AB 599, AB 915, and SB 48. And I also want to go over the HUD statement to help LGBTQ homeless youth. First, I want to explain AB 599.
What the hell does this even mean?
AB 599 is a bill that will remove expulsion based on a student having tobacco-based products like nicotine vapes, cigarettes, tobacco rum, and any other nicotine products. Schools will also be required to take a public health approach to address the possession of drugs. The schools will be required to collaborate with treatment providers, local agencies of education, and community-based programs to help the student. This bill has to go into effect before July 1st of 2025.
That does not have to do with anything about marijuana.
I am fully aware of that, but AB 599 shows a possible way for schools to help students who use marijuana instead of penalizing them, or on other substances as well. Suspensions and expulsions don't help people get off of substances. Instead, they keep these students stuck in a vicious cycle. AB 599 is the stepping stone for students to get the help they actually need to stop depending on substances just to live out their everyday lives. It is a lot to ask for schools to take on this responsibility, but schools are often youth's only safe space, which is why there needs to be more government funding for schools, which is a whole nother topic within itself.
Okay, so AB 599 can help develop an outline for a bill that will also require schools to reallocate students to community-led studies instead for punishing them?
Yep, but there is another drug-related bill that I want to talk about, which is AB 915. AB 915 requires instructors to teach elementary and middle school students about the harmful effects of drugs, such as alcohol, tobacco, narcotics, and other drugs that are seen as dangerous. This bill will also require schools to work with state and national organizations to provide an in-depth and unbiased education on opioid and drug overdose prevention, opioid and drug safety, and stigma reduction. Schools will also be required to have programs to assist someone during an opioid overdose.
This seems more opioid-based. What does this have to do with marijuana?
This bill aims to save lives from drugs like opioids, but that doesn't mean that marijuana isn't included about the substances that they will learn through this bill. What matters is this bill will allow students to learn about drugs not from a place of fear, but from a place of solid facts, so that way they can make their own decisions on what they want to do with the information instead of being told what to do.
I guess that makes sense.
Now I want to get into a bill that I think will help LGBTQ youth the most, which is SB 48. California SB 48 bill requires schools to implement an ethnic studies course which will teach students the histories of marginalized people whose stories have been untold. Students will be able to see themselves in the curriculum, allowing them to flourish. History courses will have to tell the stories of people of color and LGBTQ people. This allows kids to get some exposure to LGBTQ concepts while keeping it age appropriate. Normalizing LGBTQ and talking about their past will make students feel heard and seen. People who are not LGBTQ will understand the vibrant history and will hopefully shift towards an attitude of acceptance. LGBTQ youth will also feel important because their contributions and roles will be highlighted, and they will feel like they helped in the development of our state of California as well as the United States. So they will feel like their roles are essential.
When will this be implemented?
Schools will offer these courses in the 2025 and 2026 school year, and the class of 2030 will be the first graduating class to graduate with an ethnic studies course. And there's also another important topic that I need to discuss, which is youth homelessness, specifically amongst LGBTQ people. The Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, launched a new homeless initiative to help LGBTQ youth get support from trained shelters and service providers. LGBTQ youth will get their specific needs met, which will allow them to gain resources to get a better life. Since nearly 40% of homeless youth identifies LGBTQ, this initiative will help many people's lives be saved.
I'm really hopeful for the future, but I also want to hear someone's real life perspective on this topic.
Welcome to my show, and I'm here with.
Can you tell me your experience as an LGBTQ youth in high school?
So I actually didn't come out until I was a freshman in college, so navigating high school while in the closet was interesting. I definitely remember people saying stuff like, "that's so gay," and other more intense versions of that throughout middle and high school. My extended family also can be quite homophobic and conservative at times, which is mainly what stopped me from coming out earlier. But passing comments like those obviously didn't help either. I remember it was usually a big deal when someone came out, and people would talk about it a lot, not always in the nicest way, and I also wanted to avoid all of that attention.
Can you describe your marijuana experiences and how often and at what age you used it?
I first started smoking weed in 11th grade, but I didn't start using it heavily until the following year. About halfway through senior year, I was using it every day. This trend continued basically until I finished college. I still smoke weed now, but in much smaller amounts and not nearly as frequently. At this point, I'll do it with friends socially, but I try not to buy my own weed because it can be easy to fall back into doing it regularly when it was available to me.
Do you think the use of marijuana is linked to the issues you face living as a member of the LGBTQ community?
I definitely think that I used weed as a way to cope with my depression and anxiety throughout my senior year of high school and then college as well. Obviously, there are a lot of factors that inform one's mental health, but I do think being in the closet and holding onto a lot of internalized hate regarding my sexuality was one of the major factors for me in high school. I remember wishing I was straight for so long because it would just be easier for me, especially when it comes to dealing with some parts of my family. Not being able to accept and love yourself is miserable. Even though I would normally smoke with friends and play it off as we're just having fun, in retrospect, I was definitely trying to escape my reality, even a little bit, and all of those coercive feelings. I let go of most of that when I got into college and was out to everyone, but my weed usage actually increased during that time. I think this was mainly because a lot of my friends smoked regularly as well, and we enabled each other to keep going, but the stress from school also probably played into that.
Looking back, would you have wanted to see yourself represented in the school's curriculum, and do you think it would have been an alternative way to cope with issues?
I think representation is obviously important, but I think that it is the culture of a school that will have more of an impact on how queer people deal with their internal journeys towards love and pride in themselves. I have to say that things change very quickly in terms of this at my high school. My brother is 6 years younger than me, and I watched him and his friends go through school, and everything felt very different from what I remember. He was straight and played sports and hung out with a lot of kids like that, and they didn't say stuff like, "that's so gay," and even spoke out against it in their groups when it came up. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't ever happen anymore, but I do think that a lot of progress has been made since I was there. I do think that greater representation is one of the better ways to shift our cultural norms and what is regarded as cool or acceptable. I do wonder what would have been like for me if I was born 10 years later, but I try not to dwell on it too much. I'm not sure if it would have changed my timeline for coming out or my weed usage or anything really. Sorry if I feel like I remembered a bit on this one. But yes, I think positive, encouraging representation is always helpful for people that have historically been treated poorly because of their identity. I really want to thank the interviewee for sharing his perspective and allowing us to view someone else's experience, which shows how real this problem can be. I want to make a clear emphasis that using medical marijuana and using it recreationally isn't bad, but when it comes to having a crippling addiction, that's when it becomes kind of bad. But the goal of this video is to show that there are other ways to kind of cope with your issues instead of going straight to drugs. It is really important to make sure that we serve the LGBTQ youth
and give them equal opportunities to shine to their full potential, because they are the youth that will help create a better future for all of us.